I'm going to ask Renee Wynn to come up and take over. She is the former CIO of NASA, and she's worked with a lot of very, very smart people over her years. And she's on the board, the advisory board for Interos, and she's also helps out at MITRE with probably some very interesting stuff that she can't talk about. So, so she's a powerhouse and a thought leader. And we're so happy that she's going to kick this panel off, and we're so happy we didn't have a government shutdown.
Yes, isn't that great, Mary Beth? Beth, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Take care, everybody.
Yeah. So good morning. I'm not going to be up here entertaining you for the next 45 minutes. I'm going to ask for help. And when she talks about cybersecurity is everywhere, it is in space too. So just keep in mind that you rely on space every single day, and that is also vulnerable to attacks as well. And not just vulnerable, it has been proven out. And you can go on the YouTube and watch a video or two on how to hack a satellite. Always made my job so much better when I had social media helping me. But anyway, let's get on to invite some amazing folks up here to join me on stage and share their wisdom with you. So first we have our own John Sherman, who's the Deputy of Defense Chief Information Officer, or Deputy of Defense, Department of Defense Chief Information Officer. John, good to do there. If you can get in there safely, please. Yes, good. And Valerie Cofield, Chief Strategy Officer from Cybersecurity, Infrastructure, and Security Agency, better known as CISA. Good, Val. It's good to have you up here. Yes. And then Meghan Good, who's Vice President of Cyber Accelerator at Leidos. Thank you. Great. Everybody sit down without knocking anything over. Good. All right. Thank you, Mary Beth, for your opening words and your kind remarks, certainly about what's going on in cyber and making it more diverse for folks that are trying to solve the problems of cybersecurity and all of that. Of course, no matter what many problems we solve, people will still click on a link in that email that comes. And have you ever read the email chains? Right? Really? You thought that was a real person. It looks like the passwords Google makes up for me. And so cybersecurity is everywhere, and I reminded you about what happens in space as well. But recently we had the MGM ransomware. You know, you never think it's possible that it had happened to you until it happens to you. You imagine all those customers trying to get into their rooms, right? And how many of you actually load the room key on your phone? No, right? Good answer, right? And that didn't work. And then checking in instead of swiping your credit cards or even being digitally checked in where you just sort of show your ID and they get you in that one, they had to get out. Some of you probably have never seen these before, but it's a little thing that comes here. You put your credit card on it and you slide right, not swipe. I said slide, and now you have an imprint of the card to do that again. So much for the chips that we put in earlier in this millennium. So it happens everywhere. It happens in different ways. It's ransomware, it's vulnerabilities, and it's extremely sophisticated nation-state actors operating in very sophisticated ways. So with my colleagues here to my left, I'm going to run the row here, but that's not what we're going to do the whole time. So share with me, John, your biggest challenge and how you're approaching it.
So first of all, thank you for having me here today. What a wonderful group, and thank you for having me here this morning and some wonderful co-panelists here. One of the biggest challenges I face in the cybersecurity area, and I was talking to Renata about this beforehand, is ensuring that cybersecurity is everybody's business. You talked about the MGM grant issue, and I think my colleagues will talk a little about that. But running in the spheres that a lot of us do, chief information officers, chief information security officers, in the military context, what we call the J6s or other codes like that, a lot of times, and historically, it's cybersecurity and cyber matters have been seen in the purview of those women and men. But as we see increasingly, cybersecurity and cyber issues have got to be everybody's business in the C-suite, the commanders, and others, because deficiencies there can affect everyone. And so within the Department of Defense, one of the challenges is as we have engaged in combat operations over the past 20 years in areas like Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Horn of Africa, and elsewhere, the adversaries we faced, while very capable on the battlefield, did not have the cyber capabilities as we look at state actors, such as the People's Republic of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and others. And the sort of tech debt issues we have to get after to harden our weapon systems and harden our networks can no longer be optional. And moreover, if there are deficiencies in that area, it's not only the CIOs, CISOs, CISAs, and others in the IT community who have to take responsibility. It has to be the commanders, directors, and others. And you'll hear terms at DoD like cyber survivability, and maybe a new one we're working on that I'm talking to General Nakasone about, cyber accountability. That in the same way, if a commander loses a weapon in the field, runs a ship up onto a reef, or doesn't ensure proper maintenance on an aircraft, so must it be for cybersecurity. So that's one of the bigger challenges I think not only I face, but I bet a lot of you do in your companies and organizations as well. And that's something that throughout my tenure for nearly 3 years and pressing forward, I'm going to keep my foot on the gas with.
Great, thank you so much. Valerie, let's turn to you from CISA, and what are some of the biggest challenges in the approach to addressing it?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, and it's such an honor to be here this morning with all of you and with my fellow panelists. I wanted to kind of riff off of some of the things that have already been discussed. I think one of the concerns actually, when you think about the MGM casino hack and you think about what's going on with the ransomware scourge that we've seen over the past couple of years, is the fact that it's not just the nation state actors, that it's really, really easy now, and it's much, it's easy for criminals to be able to access other criminals, other skill sets. There's access brokers on the dark web that can connect cyber criminal groups to skill sets, to tools that they need to perpetrate whatever crime that they're thinking about perpetrating. And so the entry to barrier in the cyber criminal landscape is much lower and much easier. And that's one thing that's something that we've got to change. We've got to change that calculus so that it is more expensive, it's more difficult. We've got to put more friction in that ecosystem. And then I want to talk to you a little bit more about kind of what John was talking about. This is something that our Director Easterly, is very passionate about. It's this idea of corporate cyber responsibility. So we know about corporate social responsibility, but really one thing that Director Easterly is really passionate about is corporate cyber responsibility. That we know that every company, whether you're a small business or a large enterprise, there is technology that is interwoven in everything that you do. And so it's very important that at the very top, at the CEO level, they understand, does the company have a cyber incident response plan? Has that plan been exercised? Everyone, does every employee understand how crucial they are to ensuring the cybersecurity of that company? And it comes from the top, and that's something that I think is a challenge, and it's something that we want to change in the culture, and that CISA and Director Easterly are very passionate about.
Great, thank you very much, Valerie. Meghan, Leidos, a provider of services to the United States government. What do you think some of the challenges might be and how to solve them?
Well, I mean, first to Val's point, I just want to be like, yes, 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 we've got all those things covered. But for me, really, I'm a technologist. I lead our Cyber Accelerator, so it's all about R&D and about what's next. And the big challenge for me is complexity. There's so many different kinds of technology in everything that we do of different levels. There's things that are legacy systems that we all rely upon that are handling data in ways that are out of date. And then there's systems that we're building that are brand new that are interacting with those, and that interaction is creating in itself a more complex situation for our overall cybersecurity posture. So for us, a lot of it is how do we get down to identifying where there is that complexity? How do we make it simpler? How do we address it with interesting engineering? How do we iteratively test over time so that it's not a once and done? It's looking at it like an adversary. It's actually building those adversarial tools into our toolkit so that we're testing things before they get fielded. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, I have a feeling, today. But it's a lot about being very proactive and really opening our arms to that new technology to help us accelerate being more proactive.
Great, thank you, Meghan, for that one. Valerie, you mentioned Jen Easterly sort of focused on this corporate responsibility, accountability, that it's all the way through an organization to do that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the CISA's, her other priorities at CISA?
Yeah, so another priority that she is very passionate about and our agency is very focused on is this idea of secure by design. So a lot of times when we think about cybersecurity, there's a bit of looking at the customer or the end user of the product and blaming them for their lack of using a multi-factor authentication or whatever. There's a litany of things. But really what she wants to do and what CISA is really working on is shifting that paradigm and really looking at going back upstream and looking at how is software designed to begin with. And so this idea of secure by design is really that we want to promote that at the onset of whatever product you're trying to create, that cybersecurity is considered then, not afterwards as a bolt-on, which you know inherently makes the product more insecure, but really trying to make that paradigm shift. And right now we know that the market forces are not really rewarding that type of behavior because it does take longer then to produce that product in a way that is cyber secure, and right now the market is really just rewarding first to market. So how do we change that paradigm? How do we work so that we can ensure that the products from the beginning are there and they are secure? I mean, an example that she likes to use is really with the car industry. I mean, would we be happy if every month or every week we had to bring our cars in because there was a security issue with it that we need to get fixed? I don't think we would be, but yet we are okay with that when it comes to software. I mean, I know how many times I get an update on my phone of bugs that need to be fixed on my apps. You know, it's a weekly, it's certainly a monthly occurrence, if not even sooner than that. And so that's really what we're focusing in on and really trying to change the discussion and the paradigm.
Great, thank you so much for that, Valerie. I think that sets the stage for more of this conversation. So Meghan, federal agencies have different budgets. We're happy that they at least have a 45-day budget right now, right? And some have a focus, like the Department of Defense, like cybersecurity. It matters to the warfighter in the field. Others agencies don't quite have the same resources, and I'm sure John would agree that he would love more resources. I'm not saying that in that one, but how do you help those businesses or the federal agencies that are, frankly, target rich and resource poor?
Right, and the answer is really, it depends. But I actually think it's a great answer around the kinds of technology solutions that can be deployed. When you couple it with the people who are working there today, and you realize that those people can't work hard enough to really address the challenge. So there is this need for technology. And for me, again, I'm into this, it's one where I see that as the best use of where these worlds can combine. I think a lot of more novel technologies, and I'm sure we're going to wear this buzzword out today about machine learning, but it's not a buzzword because the technology is real and it's in place, it's used. But with that, we really can accelerate what a person can do and how a person can respond. And I'm most eager to see that happen at those agencies, where there is a lot of variety in the kinds of data that they use, the kinds of interactions that they have with the public, but then the budget isn't there necessarily to bring the staff that we've been used to seeing. It's not an FTE thing. And I think this actually helps us tie in with making sure our workforce is the right size to the challenge as well. But really what we're looking at here is measurable ways where we're taking in lots of data and taking action on it quickly and using the kinds of technology that's available across the board. I do think we're learning lessons at a larger scale, like I think with what CISA is doing and what DoD, where you're able to implement that at a much broader level, whole of government. When you get down into those individual agencies, you have to scale it all down, but we really need to also be scaling the amount of humans needed to make the work.
Yeah, thank you, Meghan, too. So that sort of reminds us that secure by design being the paradigm shift would make a huge difference regardless of the size of the entity, because the person, the human in the loop, could actually be able to do more.
Can I add on to?
Yeah, please do.
So, another real passion of our director and also a focused area of our agency is this idea of target rich and what we like to call cyber poor, actually, is that There are, critical infrastructure sectors. If many of you are, I'm not sure if many of you are aware of CISA's. I think Director Easterly's done a great job of really promoting CISA as the cyber defense agency, like she likes to call it. But also, one of our core missions is really protecting both the cyber and physical infrastructure of the United States. And when you look at the 16 critical infrastructure sectors that exist in the U.S., they are very diverse. Some of them are very well resourced, have a lot of cyber skills, and some are not. And so really, when we look at that, the divergence there, we're really trying to help focus our attention and our CISA's resources on those sectors like water, health, the healthcare sector, and the education sector, and really help them. If you look at, as we just already talked about, ransomware, unfortunately, it's almost weekly that you read a ransomware report about a hospital being attacked or a school system being attacked, and it's really, it's something that's got to change. And so it's been a real focus area of our agency, is to really work with those sectors. We have a close relationship right now with HHS, and we're really trying to work together to bring our resources, our best practices, and be able to help that sector raise their level of cybersecurity. And we're trying to do the same thing with the education sector, where CISA recently participated at a White House a K-12 cybersecurity summit that was hosted by the White House. And it's a focus area, and really what we're trying to do with our regional assets. So CISA is based here, but we have over 500 regional assets around the country. We're really trying to work and help those hospitals and those school systems really understand sort of the resources that CISA can offer. And we're also trying to work with other well-resourced companies that might be able to provide free resources to some of these sectors that really need that attention and the cybersecurity expertise.
Great, thank you for that, Ed. So workforce, I've heard it a lot. All right, John, beginning with you, from recruiting to culture change to teaching people not to click on links. What's the approach at Department of Defense?
Let me start with talent writ large, and maybe and my colleagues can chime in on this too. 2 years ago, now nearly 3 years ago, I was testifying up at the Senate Armed Service Committee and the subcommittee on personnel that Senator Gillibrand chairs. And as I was preparing for this, I was doing a lot of deep dives on what we're doing in terms of cyber and digital talent, the Department of Defense. And I learned that although a lot of good foundational work had been accomplished on things like policies and frameworks and coding work roles, we didn't have an overall strategy. Now, there had apparently been one in draft that was never published. And having a North Star like that in an organization as big as DoD is critical. So I got the team to working on this, and then we have an outfit called the Workforce Innovation Director, or the WID, that works in our resource and analysis portfolio there. And I got to tell you, this is one of our flagship efforts now, 2.5+ years later. We've published a strategy, we have an implementation plan, we've updated the requisite policies, but the most important thing we've really done is energize the Department of Defense to think differently about talent. In the opening segment, you may have heard me talk about, if we leverage, or should I say, when we leverage every bit of talent this country can bring to bear, no adversary, no challenger can take us down. That means we have to be very different in how we do things. We have to think differently about how and where we recruit, retain, and upskill. I want a workforce, I am determined to have a workforce that looks like America. And with all due respect to my colleagues at OPM and elsewhere, the standard kind of USA jobs application process is not going to get us there. So we're working with organizations, schools, thank you, and elsewhere in more of a pull versus push sort of mechanism there to get out to groups and communities that have not maybe thought about a government career. We're thinking differently about the 4-year degree requirements. For some areas, data science and many other technical areas, yeah, degrees are absolutely necessary, but for some people who have practical experience out, whether in the private sector, military, or elsewhere, that's what we need to get after. We need to get after schools and places we've not gone to before. Not only 4-year institutions, but 2-year colleges, other training areas to bring folks in. Looking at apprenticeships. That's how you get a workforce that looks like the United States of America, that looks like this room, by the way. That's how we're going to win against China and Russia and Iran. Yeah, this is you all I'm talking about. And And we're going to do some things in our, this is new implementation plan. If you have a second, it's out on the DoD CIO page. You can click and look at the executive summary. That is something I want people to click on.
Yeah.
And you're going to see a lot of actions in there. Some of this, we're not sure the actions are going to work. We're taking some bold approaches. We are getting out into some unknown territory here, working with our legal side, our HR side, and others. I'm not sure if all this is going to work, but this is how we break some glass here. And we have the Deputy Secretary and the Secretary's full support on this, and all of our stakeholders. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll leave it to my colleagues to get to the, some of the other aspects you asked about, is in terms of how we think about a career in government. The 30-year career track may work for some, but we need women and men who are going to maybe come in for a few years, go back out, work with a lot of you in industry and other places, and then come back in without making it so arduous. We've got to think differently about this. That's how we win in the 21st century here, and I need your help on this. And I would like it if you take a look at that implementation plan, and I welcome your feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, John. That was inspiring, and federal careers are options, and in and out is a great option too. Valerie, what do you want to add?
I just want to say I'm going to go click on your link because I am very inspired, and I do think that honestly in the federal government, DoD is really leading the way with a lot of their innovative hiring approaches as well as their internship programs. So my hat's off to DoD. Here, at CISA, it's been really exciting. I've been at CISA for a little over 2 years, and to see the growth of the workforce has been really phenomenal, despite having to still use USA jobs and the cumbersome process and non-intuitive process that it is. We've actually been able to grow by over 33%. So we've brought on board over 1,300 people over the past couple of years. So that's really phenomenal, and it is a challenge. And I think, as John mentioned, you've got to really. It's not a push, it's really a pull. You've got to go out there and really go to those places that are not typical to find the talent that you want to find. And I think that some of the innovative programs that DHS and CISA have are the cyber talent management system. So that's a different way that we're trying to bring on talent, and we're also trying, not that we are going to be on the same scale as the private sector, but it does help. It's a different salary model than the GS schedule, which also needs updating and changing, especially when it comes to tech jobs. But those are some of the things that we are working on. But again, my hat's off to the work that DoD is doing.
All right, so a link that you can click on, one. Meghan, how about workforce?
Well, I would say I have been at Leidos for 20 years, and actually all of that time working around cyber operations and cybersecurity, but it was never called that before. But I think with that, that's not the case today. We bring people in all the time. We've adopted the NICE framework for our cyber jobs. We actually have this whole way of navigating through your career with upskilling, with different kinds of training, and we're very big fans of experiential learning. So you learn by researching, you learn by shadowing, you learn by participating in competitions, the games that we have, the challenges that we take on. We have ones with a new emerging device. Can you hack it? Interesting things with, right now we actually just kicked off our Hacking the Hackathon event yesterday, which my colleague Desiree here is one of the key contributors to, where we have software development teams that have gone through a secure code secure code workshop, but there's something with boot in there. But in any case, they go through that workshop. They're working together against a big challenge, and their challenge this year is resilient logistics, since we've all seen supply chain issues that have happened and that affect us all. And they're coming up with interesting solutions to better monitor supply chains. And then we have a team go back and look at how well they did, a different team to aggressively test it and see where they could improve. And even though it's a rapid sprint of developing the software, they're learning lessons about how they could do better in their everyday approach to software development. We also similarly have Capture the Flag events as part of this as well. So it's really about turning the crank on it, making sure that we're consistently challenging ourselves. And the exciting part for us is that a lot of the folks involved are not computer scientists. They're not engineers necessarily. It's for everyone. It's everyone to experience those skills. And so I think that's how we get the workforce engaged. Give them a challenge and then figure out for everybody how to pair up, how to learn from someone else, and how to pass that on and use it in your everyday work.
Yeah, thank you for all those remarks. There's just a couple of things I want to pull on here is, to your point, John, about a North Star, or perhaps we'll call it the moon, cislunar orbit. And that is, in this country, we got ourselves together and we got to the moon and we're headed back. Yeah. Very excited. We're going to put the first high heel boots in regolith. Right? That'll be a slightly different footprint than you see, but probably for safety it'll be a wedge, not an actual silhouette. Because regolith is a powder and you don't want to trip. Right? So having that North Star allows this country to solve problems. If we can go to the moon, we can work in better ways to do this. On the points of diversity, we talk about this. There's also neurodiversity. Are you looking at folks perhaps that are deaf? Pattern recognition far exceeds others in this area. So there's go someplace else to find your folks. And on the point of gamification, you want to put somebody in. When I started, you got a manual, right? And you just waited for action. Now with this gamification, an individual hits their first seat to deploy and help, and they are in a much better place to make a difference, add value by doing this experiential work. So each of you have made some amazing points, but I wanted to pull on 3 of those. One is by organizing people and pointing in the same direction, you can get some amazing things done, and that diversity is diversity in a lot of different ways. So pause and open that aperture, and then gamify as much as you can because it's the best way for people to learn. It gives the greatest feedback and the lessons learned with that one. So we've talked a little bit about the workforce. All right. How about the other workforce that's hitting us now? Although we would point out that AI has been on Mars for a while. It is now in common culture today. I am a user of ChatGPT. Partly it's to learn what it is, to participate in cocktail conversations with all the 13-year-olds I know. But AI and machine learning. Not only was it hard with nation states, and that we've brought in AI and machine learning, and they are creating new environments for such things as over-trusting our technology, increased potential for deception and misinformation. From your perspective, what are some of the implications you see as AI and ML begin to reach its full potential? I'll start with you, Meghan.
All right, I'm not going to steal all the thunder on this one either. So I think for AI and machine learning, we're certainly seeing productivity benefits, right? Not a day has gone by in 2023 that it hasn't come up, and the word ChatGPT hasn't come up in a conversation. So it certainly is something that is pervasive in here. I think from an implication perspective, there is this fear of new technology adoption anyway, that jobs are going to go away. But so far in the Industrial Revolution, that's only proved that new jobs emerge. And we've already started to see that with prompt engineering, and where it's getting more important about how you craft prompts that you're using to make things more productive. I think on a converse side of things, my red team hat, or my reddish blazer here, it's all about adversarial machine learning too, and figuring out that the way for an adversary to get into machine learning models is to, mess with the training data, mess with steal the model itself and figure out what's happening, or find a way around the model. And so for us, we just have to change our approaches of how we're looking at our models and how we can identify when that's happening, and then then how we can counteract it from a defensive perspective using defensive machine learning. So for us, it's a lot about how we're investing in machine-to-machine machine learning. So there's 3 machines in there, I would say. But I think with those implications, how we deploy that at scale is going to be the big question. What do we do over time? How are we monitoring? How are we making sure there's fairness and ethics embedded in the kinds of machine learning-enabled systems that we are developing and we're deploying?
Yeah, thank you, Meghan. Machine to machine. We've seen that movie, haven't we? Yes, Valerie.
Yeah, so at CISA, AI, AI is in the zeitgeist right now, and we are working on our own action plan of how we want to look at AI, and we've got several lines of effort. So one, we're looking at AI really to improve how we do cybersecurity, right? There's a lot of benefits to AI, and we've seen even in coding, that coding has been improved if you use AI by 20 to 30%. So there's many positive aspects to AI, and really one of our lines of effort is really trying to understand how do we harness this for the good and to make cybersecurity better. Another thing that we're doing is really looking across critical infrastructure and looking to make sure that as critical infrastructure sectors employ AI into their technology, that they're doing that smartly using best practices. So we're working together with the 16 sectors and doing an analysis on that. Another line of effort is really looking at adversarial AI. So as we know, there's many good things about AI, but also conversely, there are many bad things, and it also improves how cyber criminals act, because they're using the same technology. And so we're really trying to look at the adversarial use of AI, and really looking again at how we protect our own infrastructure, but then also helping the critical infrastructure sectors think about adversarial use of AI when they look at their sectors. And then, another effort that we have is really working on, there's many policy implications to AI, and I know that the White House is working on issuing a new executive order around AI, and so we really want to be at the forefront together with NIST and other leaders in government, making sure that we deploy and responsibly use AI. And then lastly, we're really looking at workforce, of really ramping up. If you talk about the tech workforce and the mismatch of supply and demand, if you look at AI, it's even worse. And so really figuring out how do we ensure that we have the right skill sets for the AI challenge that's already upon us, and then making sure that we grow that, and help grow that workforce in the US.
Great, thank you, John.
I would frame this in kind of 3 different areas here. The first is AI and ML is here. Now, it's not what we see in the movies, but it's here. We've talked about ChatGPT, generative AI, large language models. As again, I was talking with some of our colleagues before the event over here. My daughter's a social worker, my son is a prosecutor. And although you wouldn't relate those 2 fields with AI and ML, it's going to affect both of what they do, whether it's studying case law or bringing that up, or as my daughter's helping people in need down in the Tidewater area, being able to more accurately diagnose, react, assess trends. It's going to affect all of us. So we all need to be savvy consumers, and we as technologists in this room, and as we get out and work with our companies and government agencies and others, we've got to also tamp down the hype cycle, but understand, as Val and Meghan indicated, the cyber issues with this, how it can be used unethically. And that is one thing I'll say at the Department of Defense. Ethical use of AI is our bedrock. Much has been written about this because we do kinetic operations. We defend this nation. We defend democracies. We work with like-minded allies. And we are determined to ensure that we are not going to go down any sort of path that our authoritarian competitors have done with AI and ML. And finally, as I look at it as a chief information officer, working with CISOs and others, there's a lot we're still figuring out on this about tapping into its productivity, whether it's for kind of routine tasks of looking at policies and researching things, to helping us with cybersecurity analysis at big data platforms and so on. But also understanding, as we bring in large language models, ensuring that our data is kept secure. And our CISA is looking at this, and we can't kind of go down the hype path on some of this. We must be deliberate, we must be thoughtful, and there's some work to be done. Our Chief Digital and AI Officer, Dr. Craig Martell, is leading this with Task Force Lima, some of you may have read about, and the pillar on cybersecurity is in my domain there. So we're going to do this. We're not going to be cold water on this, but we need to be thoughtful on this, along with all the other stipulations we've talked about with AI and ML. And we're going to make sure this is done securely, but we're determined too to ensure our warfighters, the women and men who command our forces, do have decision advantage if they ever need it. So that's how I see the AI and ML front.
Yeah, I think what I hear from you guys is there's just some amazing opportunities for greater productivity as well as greater protection. And there might even be an opportunity for greater offense, but we're not going to talk about that, right? But on the same side or on the other side of the ledger, that is all coming at us, right, at the same machine speed. And so at some point, you have to sort of wish who runs out of compute power before the other one, right? Is when the power goes out to see who wins on that one. But it is great opportunity, but be very thoughtful in your approach, and certainly on the ethical side, as we've seen, both in its use as well as many, many articles out there that have substantiated that ethical side to it. So I want to go back to secure by design, because we've laid out some pretty big things, right? Workforce, AI, machine learning, the large language model, how is it being fed, how is it being taught, the priorities, the critical infrastructure that's out there that in various states of maturity in terms of its ability to protect us. We're accustomed to going to the tap and getting clean water from it here in this country. That is part of your critical infrastructure, so you do have to start thinking about how do we protect all of this. So, given all of this, secure by design, what could be some approaches that you're implementing now to secure by design and holding people accountable, because we've heard that from each of you, that accountability piece is really critical. So given that it was Jen Easterly's quote that I used, secure by design, Valerie, let me look to you to get us started.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one thing that we're working on, as I mentioned before, is really to show the business proposition. Because right now, right, the market is rewarding first to market. The quicker you get your product out there, you know, you're more likely to be leading the market share in whatever your product is. But really, what we're trying to do is show that in the long run, putting in cybersecurity will make the product more secure, and also we're hoping to see that it'll make it more profitable or sustainable. It's expensive, right, to do all these patches, to constantly be updating a product or a software. So that's something that we're working on to sort of help shift the paradigm. But we're also open to ideas. It's certainly not that we have the market on this, but it's something that I think collectively, I think we've opened up this seminar talking about how much cyber is a communal issue, right? It's a community, it's an all-of-nation thing. And really, you know, we need the support and help and ideas from all of you to figure out how do we make this paradigm shift where we make sure that anyone who's trying to create software, hardware, that they really think about cybersecurity, that's, you know, their whatever vulnerability that they might not have thought about that's in their system could be something, an access point that a nation state actor ends up using, and who knows what kind of you know, intrusion and what loss will ensue for our nation or that company or whoever that ends up using that hardware or that software. And so I don't know, I mean, I feel like we don't have all the answers of how to make that paradigm shift, but we really believe that needs to happen. And certainly, again, we're open to ideas, suggestions of how do we push this forward and make this initiative a reality.
Great, thank you very much for that. Any additions, Meghan or John?
I'd add on, just with I think that we don't have all the answers thing, I think that's the same with even the technology as developed. Once it's secure by design, you still don't know the answers of what's going to happen once it's developed and deployed. But I think the struggle becomes, and what it's been in the cybersecurity community is, even we talked about MGM and the ransomware case, who clicked that first link, right? And that person, but there was so much to happen after that that really wasn't the responsibility of that one person, right? There's accountability all the way through. Just like I think as we're building these systems, we have to recognize that changes happen and that security is a moving target. It's not a one-time thing. So we need better resilience mechanisms, and we need better acceptance amongst our teams that someone's going to find something that they didn't think about because they're not looking at it from the functionality lens. They're looking at it from a different viewpoint. And so that's a lot of why we're doing the experiential challenges, is because you get a sense of those viewpoints in a safer way. And you're like, you're right. Gosh, I can't believe you found that, and I wasn't even thinking about it. And it's getting that culture of acceptance around us, but knowing that we're all in it together from a collective perspective to build resilience over time. But I think it's shifting the blame game to the how do we get better.
Thank you for that, John.
I would just add, I agree with everything that's been said. You cannot bolt on cybersecurity as an afterthought. And I know we talk a lot about software. When Director Easterly is rightfully talking about this, I'm thinking in terms of weapon systems, networks, and so on. Now, some of which were designed years ago, but particularly as we deploy things to the force, in terms of having cybersecurity at the outset. And at the outset, too, we talk so much about zero trust, of which we're determined to get deployed across DoD by 2027. And making sure that that philosophy of restricting lateral movement, assuming an enemy's already on your network, and everything that goes into the zero trust pillars to make that operational has to be done. And finally, other things cannot be optional. It's kind of what I talked about on the first comment here in terms of quantum resistant cryptography, other cyber hardening, making sure that our weapon systems and platforms are designed for a 21st century fight and not a 20th century battlefield. That is something that must be done, but you cannot bolt this on after the fact.
Yeah, thank you so much, my esteemed colleagues, for such a great conversation. So the top line message, right, is sustainable cybersecurity begins with cyber accountability. So I want to thank my panelists for their time today and their words of wisdom.